We're here to talk about the 2009-2010 season for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. But what I'm going to ask you first and foremost, this shirt on screen here, this is the shirt from said year. What player do you immediately think of when you see this shirt, Tom Foins?
Assou-Ekotto.
Interesting. Go on, expand that.
I don't know. I mean, I guess, so this 09-10 was my first year as a season ticket holder. I'd probably only been to White Hart Lane like 5 or 6 times before then, just for various different reasons, and then had an opportunity present itself for me to go halves on a season ticket, which I took. And you just couldn't pick a jammier season to start like going to Spurs regularly than 09-10. And I guess where I sat in Park Lane, Assou-Ekotto was kind of right in front of us the whole time when we were attacking the goal, the goal at Park Lane end. And he just saw a lot of him. And I think that year he developed into a really good left back. Like he was dodgy, right? Wasn't he? He had moments and he could be very erratic, and he would.
Didn't concentrate from what I remember.
Yeah, he had a kind of a sort of similar career arc to kind of Carl Walker at one point. He was just this guy that was a little bit all over the place and kind of cost us goals, but you could see that there was, a decent enough player there. And we'd had like a succession of left backs, like Lee Young-pyo, Eric Edman, Bale obviously was tried as well at left back as well, and he just felt like the latest in a long line of those. But I think in 2009, 2010, he really kind of exploded onto the scene for us and became this really dependable, solid left back, probably one of the top sort of 3 or 4 left backs in the league at that point. And I just felt like I got a really good close-up view of him quite a lot of the time at White Hart Lane, the old White Hart Lane. And yeah, he was just quite impressive to watch all of a sudden, and he just became really integral to the way that we played as well.
He did, didn't he? And it felt like one of those players that, because I remember when we signed him, and a lot of the talk was he was really good in France, and he's actually, Tottenham might have some of the kind of the more people that were more involved in like European football and stuff like Tottenham might have a bit of a player there if they play their cards right. And like you say, I think because it was quite a stuttering start to his Tottenham career. I can't remember exactly, right, but I kind of remember him sort of being in the team, sort of not being in the team, not really cementing a place. But then this year, because first game of the season, I want to say, was Liverpool,
he scored the first goal.
Of the season, he scored an absolute thunderbolt.
I think we won a free kick. So the other player that really this shirt brought to mind, it was a toss-up between Assou-Ekotto and Palacios. Palacios had such a great start to that season after having a really good second half of the season before when we signed him. And he was brilliant in that opening game against Liverpool. And I think he did this outrageous bit of skill on the edge of the box and won a free kick. And then I think it was Huddleston and Assou-Ekotto was stood over it. And I think Huddleston stuck it into the wall. And then it bounced to Assou-Ekotto, and he took one touch outside of his boot and then levers it top corner. Absolute belter. Yeah. And Bassong scored the other goal in that game as well. And it was 2 defenders that got us off the mark for that season. But yeah, it was a screamer, like a proper screamer, top corner past Reina. And against Liverpool as well, I think that season they went on to have a proper shocker. So it was really satisfying.
Do you think it's quite funny, isn't it? Remember how much of a talking point it was when he did his whole thing of, I don't really watch football. I don't actually really like football. I'm good at it, but I don't watch any games that anyone else plays or anything. I'm just not that arsed about it. How, I don't know, just how things change, because I feel like that wouldn't, I mean, maybe I'm giving kind of the internet and football journalists too much credit, but I don't feel like that would really be a thing anymore. We've had sort of players since then, Jan Vertonghen, Eric Dyer, who have probably been in a similar ilk, right? Aren't really actually that asked about football, are kind of quite open in that they're interested in kind of culture and all this type of thing. And back then, though, like 2009, 2010, it shows you how much things change in a fairly short space of time, because it got very, very, you know, call the vicar. You know, how could he say this sort of? People were so like, there was like an almost like moral outrage about a footballer saying he wasn't really that asked about football. And I remember it really pissing off quite a few Spurs fans. And I think because I was a bit younger at this point, I didn't really care. I kind of liked that about him. I just thought as long as he's playing all right for Spurs, I couldn't really care less if he's like into football
Yeah,
or
it's quite
not, right?
surprising that Redknapp sort of took to that. Well, maybe he didn't take to it, but he didn't seem to have a massive problem with it. And I guess it was a case of if you're performing and if you're not causing any trouble, which I don't think he did. So I think he did under AVB. I don't think he was in any way because, well, not like AVB is probably a bit more of an iron fist and probably wants his players to be these kind of robotic football machines. And he was a personality. So I think Redknapp probably just sort of took it as, well, whatever, mate, as long as you're winning tackles and still bombing up the left wing and you know, getting yourself 5-6 assists every season, don't really give a shit, which I think kind of rubbed off on the fans as well. And he used to walk to the stadium. He used to get the tube to the Seven Sisters and used to walk up the high road, didn't he? Apparently, there's quite a lot of stories that have come out recently that he, before a game, he'd have like a packet of Skips and a coffee and a croissant in the changing room whilst, you know, everyone else is kind of wolfing.
Sounds like a decent
Yeah,
meal deal, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean, if you're looking to be one with the fans, then you know, you're only missing a pint of neck oil, I suppose, aren't you? But he was just good value, and I think he really, I think he summed up that season as well because he'd had a decent end to the season last previous campaign, and then he just rode the feel good factor of Redknapp. And it really worked in the system as well because we started that season with, so Lennon was right wing, Palacios and Huddleston were in the middle, and Modric had been moved out wide. And I think long term, I remember a interview with Redknapp that he felt as if Bale would eventually, if he stopped kind of his hair and going down injured in training, he would be a brilliant left back in that system because Modric would drift inside and Bale would bomb up the outside. And Assou-Ekotto ended up being that player. And he was so perfect for the system. And for a little while, I think we went the first 4 games, we won them all, I think. And Assou-Ekotto was really key to that system working. And then eventually when Bale came in that January, I think because of an Assou-Ekotto injury, or he'd gone to AFCON, one of the two, or maybe both, I can't remember, they ended up making a really good partnership on the left as a more natural kind of balanced left-hand side. So I think his role changed a few times through the season. And he reacted to, you know, his place being under threat and, you know, Bale coming in and exploding onto the scene and stuff, and ended up having a really solid kind of 8 or 9 out of 10 season. And I think he did all right for the next 2 as well. I think he was ended up being far less of a liability than people thought he would.
I was just reading here, so in the 2007-2008 season, he had a massive knee injury. This is kind of the sort of details of these things.
Yeah,
you know, they get lost.
I don't remember that at all,
don't they? No, so he had a big knee injury and he had to have surgery. He only played 2 games in the 2007-2008 season, and there's a quote from him here saying that, when your surgeon tells you maybe you won't play football anymore, many things are different in your mind. Before, when you're injured, your money comes into your account every month, everything is cool. But when they speak to you about the end of your career, when you're 22 or 23, it's maybe why I had to change. I'm safe now, but it gave me a lesson. That's why I've changed many things in my mind and in my life. And apparently this was with regard to, you know, his attitude towards his conditioning, and his training and everything like that. And it seems to be from that point on that, Harry Redknapp picked him up and basically said, he's been injured, but I've been very impressed with him. He's in great form. He's an outstanding left back, is what Redknapp said to him after, because it's noted, in 2008, 2009, this season, he really did kick on. He went from strength to strength and clearly was very focused on his career, on himself. It does feel as though things sort of ended on a fairly acrimonious note. From what I remember, I don't think he was kind of much of a happy camper at the end of his time at Spurs and everything like that. But one thing I do remember about him, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was he was one of those players, wasn't he, that was in the early days, and this is the early days of Twitter. He used Twitter, didn't he? I seem to recall, and he would speak just basically like a post. Darren Bent was another like player that
Yeah,
used Twitter a lot. I remember he was like the Twitter
yeah.
footballer,
Rio
wasn't he?
Ferdinand, probably the
Really?
other. Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I can remember Assou-Ekotto being one of those
yeah. It
as
rings a
well,
bell,
right?
and it wouldn't surprise me. It's the sort of thing that again would have had people like Redknapp, in the heyday of I don't own a smartphone, I can't even type on a computer kind of thing. Having one of his players who, say, openly didn't really give that much of a shit about kind of how he was
Yeah,
perceived, and really was, and quite, understandably and quite rightly, he just wanted to play football for the paycheck, and he was good at it, so he wanted to get as much out of it as he possibly could. But you can understand why the club may have had some fears about that sort of personality being on a completely open platform like Twitter. I don't remember anything
yeah.
controversial, but it really wouldn't surprise me if you found one, at the very top of the Google search, like Spurs star in.
The, there was, you remember, towards the end of his Tottenham career, he had there's that French comedian, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Dieudonné or something like that is pronounced, and he essentially he created that thing called the
I remember, was this
quenelle,
Anelka did the
which was
celebration, and I remember
exactly that, which kind of like an inverted Nazi
right,
salute or something or other. That's a pretty bold thing for me to say because I don't know the full ins and outs of what this thing was, but I know it's very closely associated with
yeah, it sounds
anti-Semitism,
about right,
and
yeah,
I remember Assou-Ekotto tweeting something like "the quenelle is beautiful" or
yeah,
something like that. After Anelka had
yeah,
got in trouble with the FA, and I think his Tottenham career pretty much disappeared from that point onwards. So, like you say, a
yeah,
personality like that on something like Twitter, it doesn't generally mix so well. Funnily enough, you know what, the player I always think of when I see this, and maybe because I don't know why, maybe because I had such a visceral reaction to him, was Roman
yeah,
Pavlyuchenko. I always think of him when I think of this shirt, just straight up. And you were quite a fan of his, weren't you? But I couldn't
yeah.
stand the fella. I really,
I, I can't tell how ironic it was about much of a fan I was, because weirdly I was talking about this in a WhatsApp group earlier today. Pav came in overnight. We sold 40 league goals, maybe 50, in selling Keenan Berbatov, and I don't think
yeah,
Pav got close to that in his 4 years with us. I think in the end he got 16 league goals or something like that. We had him, Fraser Campbell, and Giovanni Dos Santos as our striking options. Yeah, and
I mean, to be fair to Pav, if you got like multipliers for the types of goals he scored, I mean, he might have come because the types of goals he scored for Spurs were
yeah,
always
yeah,
unbelievable,
he
right?
was a good finisher. If he had nothing else to do, he was a really good finisher. If you think of the goal against Young Boys in the Champions League qualifier, um, away from home, that made it 3-2 and basically made the second leg a lot more comfortable than it could have been at one
Yes,
point.
yeah.
That was an absolute banger. His two against,
It was from such an
yeah,
good
no
angle, wasn't
right
it,
to
as
score
well?
from there. Really good build up as well. I think Keane was involved in it as well. And then his two goals against Birmingham on the last game of the season, a couple of years later as well, screamers. But the one that really sticks out in my mind is the goal against Chelsea in 10-11. And the ball's fired into him at the edge of the box, and he's running onto it, and he takes such a bad first touch that the ball basically goes back to where it came from. But he manages to get onto the end of it and swings his left foot on it, and it sort of goes round one of the centre backs and past Czech. And I think it was for 1-0. Um, and it was so frustrating because you knew 10 years before he probably would have been a brilliant Premier League striker. if he had someone else up top with him, and if everyone was just creating chances for him, he probably could have had a 15, 20 goal Premier League season. But as the game sort of developed, you couldn't rely on him to do everything at all. And in this season, he was frozen out as well until I think it was about February, and he came on against Wigan. Do you remember? I think we were 1 goal up, and it was a proper like bog of a pitch that we were playing on, and he scored 2 goals. And at that point, I think Redknapp did the same sort of thing as that, as I was talking about with Assou-Ekotto, just did this like, and there he is. God bless him. He did this thing of like, look, he's a good enough player. He's not up to it. Like he's not prepared to do the running. But if he shows me that he can in training, then I'll play him a bit more. And then he went on this amazing run. I think he scored 6 in his next 7 in the league.
I kind of vaguely remember
he
this,
was deep because Defoe got injured in January, I think, and he was our top scorer. So for a little while, we had Pav and Crouch up front, which was a really, really tough watch. But he just went on this it was a complete purple patch. He got a couple in the League Cup as well. And there's an argument to say that if he hadn't have hit that, we probably wouldn't have got top 4 that season, because Defoe didn't come back all guns blazing. I don't think he scored many goals when he came back into the team after injury. And Pav just sort of kept ticking over. So, yeah, maybe he deserves a bit more of a higher place in our affections for what he actually managed to achieve that season.
78 appearances for Tottenham Hotspur, 20 goals. It's so funny, isn't it? And it's another one of these things that reminds you of until Harry Kane came along, how long we were trying to find a striker that wasn't Jermaine Defoe that could actually score goals for Tottenham. It was wild. My earliest memory of him, with Pavlyuchenko, is I think it was after we signed him, we announced it, and he was coming the season after. It was one of those in that little era, like how we got Modric done. I seem to recall Pavlyuchenko being another one of those deals that Spurs just got done. It was like Spurs have signed this Russian striker. He's like Russia's main man. He's like their guy. It's a really good bit of business. And then, oddly enough, England were playing Russia, I think that same week or something like that. We played in Russia on an artificial pitch. And he scored 2 like worldies against England. And I remember watching it in the pub being like, hello, are we onto something here? And it was very swiftly like, no, we're not really.
Because he was playing up front with Arshavin, wasn't he? And the Gooners had bought Arshavin the winter before we got Pav. I think it was the winter before, or maybe it was the one after. But they formed a really decent partnership for Russia. And I think they'd done well at Euro 2008 as well. And so, obviously we'd signed him just after that. And yeah, you're right. He sort of came with this a bit of like, maybe this guy he sort of looks like he could do everything. And in many ways he could, but not very well. He was quite big. He could head the ball, hold the ball up, finish, penalties. He had quite a few different things in his armory, but the bad really did outweigh the good. And I think he was one of those who Redknapp very sort of very obviously pointed towards him not being willing to travel with the team on away games. There was a whole thing about a couple of players in the ranks who he basically said he couldn't rely on to travel away from home. And it was quite obvious that Pav was one of them, allegedly. He just didn't fancy travelling up to Newcastle and Sunderland and stuff like that, apparently.
I want to ask you, mate, on the shirt itself, back to the shirt, what do you make of this one? What do you make of the 2009? Mainly the home strip, first of all, but, the other ones naturally come into the conversation.
It's horrible, isn't it?
It's a stinker, isn't it? It's one of... Because the funny thing is, I say that because I look at the third shirt there, nicely modelled by Mr. Wilson Palacios, the away shirt modelled by Mr. Jonathan Woodgate, and I'm like...
Yeah, I had the away kit. I had the blue. Yeah, it was quite nice, but
this, it stinks. It's like my sort of most gammon foaming at the mouth thing is get yellow off the home shirt of Tottenham Hotspur. Get it off there. Like, what is it doing? What is it doing? And just these weird on the shoulders. These like on like the sort of collarbone chevrons.
It looks
You know
like
what I mean?
you're wearing like a regal cloak, and that it's sort of dragging behind you. Really bad, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you could. I mean, they are shocking because they just don't look like they belong there. But if you could just about stomach that, if it wasn't for the bits along the side of the torso as well, the really big,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just a strip. It got wider as it went down, so it just unmissable. I went to there was a pre-season friendly tournament at Wembley, which I think they called the Wembley Cup or something, and it was Spurs.
No, they call
Yeah,
it that now.
it was Spurs, Barcelona, Celtic, and then there was a team, I believe, from Egypt who had signed Hossam Ghali, and there was a really quite a large amount of Spurs fans that went to that tournament because they basically did 2 games on the same day. So if you went, you could see both games on one ticket.
Jake Livermore's well,
It
did he
was,
win
yeah, I
against
think he scored a header
Barcelona?
against Barcelona, but most people I know went just so they could boo Ghali. And then he didn't play, or they didn't select him, or something like that. So I remember there was a sort of a bit of a kind of a faux disappointment.
Oh, we'll have
Yeah,
to watch
yeah.
Spursy.
And then when they came out in this kit to play against Barcelona, there was already a lot of talk about like it's the first time we're all going to see it kind of up close. And there was genuinely some booing that I heard when it was like shown on screen as a "get your kit now" sort of thing. Just,
Only
yeah,
79.99.
so bad. Yeah, it's a shame because I always think. I mean, I kit talk is one of those things of in the summer it's like, do we really have nothing else to talk about? But it is always
Hello.
yeah.
You're
Welcome to
shitting
the
on the
pod.
USP
Yeah,
here.
but it's what you do in it, right? It's what the team ends up doing in it that makes it. So I don't think it's an iconic kit, but I have affectionate memories of this kit. I think about, we beat Arsenal, Chelsea at home, City away. That was all this kit. The Wigan 9-1. So there is some really good memories in this kit. But they don't outweigh just how poor this design is. And I don't think we've had a shocking one like this since. I think this is definitely the worst of the last 20 years. I can't think of any others.
I know what you're saying, but it almost, it kind of annoys me that we had one of, and we're going to get onto all of this, but that we had one of the best modern day periods of Spurs, or one of the biggest moments, one of the highest highs in this
Yeah, it's a shame.
abomination. Like, it's just, and I know some people say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Who cares?" I do. I don't know. I look at it and I'm like, God, that bloody kit. I remember when I first saw it, it was going to that. I think it was probably going to that game at Wembley, and I saw one fella wearing it in the crowd. He was walking up. I was going there with my dad to the tournament to watch us play Barcelona, and there was this geezer walking up the stairs, like a couple of people in front of us, and I said to my dad, like, "Look, have you seen that, the new Spurs shirt?" And my dad was just like really loudly, like, 'cause he's a bit no filter in these sort of things. He was like, that's the Spurs shirt with that yellow on it. It's disgusting. And the bloke sort of turned round as if like we'd said something about his kids or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
was just. I remember we sort of just gave him this look as in like, it's a
Yeah,
Spurs
yeah.
shirt, mate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not, but that's kind of one of my sort of lasting memories of it. And it's I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, I actually quite like the Puma kits overall, to be honest. And I believe this is our last. We went to Under Armour after this,
Yeah.
didn't we? Or did we have? Or did we have one more? Wait, was next year? Was the following season that
I think,
first Champions League year? Maybe no. Maybe it was Puma again. One last year.
yeah,
The
with
one with
stripe across, and it was Investec,
the blue on the
Investec
top.
in Europe and Oresma in the league,
No,
Autonomy in the league. The
autonomy.
next season was Oresma. It might have been 11-12
Yeah.
was our first Under Armour year. We definitely had it under AVB,
Okay.
and they were just so boring. I know this one's a shocking kit, but I felt like the Under Armour kits were so dull and so boring.
they were just very I don't know, they just felt very like
Yeah,
softball kits or something. Do you know what I mean? They felt too, and I don't mean this as any insult Americans, but they felt very American. That's the thing. Like it didn't. They felt quite removed from sort of English sporting culture, which is funny because like you've got a brand like Castor now, they're an English brand. They're I think Scouse not English, I should say. I think they're based in Liverpool, Castor, and they feel very American as well. Their kits, the big sort of winged logo and all that type of thing. One of the other things actually quickly on this one, the 0910 one, is Mansion. They got some bang for their buck on this shirt. Look how
yeah.
much real estate they've got on
I
the
was
front of our
just
shirt
thinking
with
that.
that. Like,
I can't think of another sponsor that we've had that is like that's like a book, that they've got on there. Considering,
in case you
yeah,
weren't aware, we are
yeah,
sponsored by
yeah,
Mansion.com, casino
yeah.
and
It's the
poker.
Simpsons joke of the guy who's written on his big hand, isn't it? Because the first such
Yeah.
season we sponsored Tottenham Hotspur was, yeah, yeah, that's a shock. I'm pleased that we did away with Mansion in the end. I know people complain about AIA and the ridiculous argument of how much red there is on the kit. Like, there's nothing you're going to do about it. They're our sponsor. They're not going to change their brand just for the sake of it being on the front of a Spurs shirt and being blue or something. But Mansion really was ugly, and very, very
Yeah.
indicative of the time, of the times.
It's that weird kind of the typeset, whatever it is. Is it calligraphy? It feels like it should be like the first letter of a right wing newspaper, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Like the Daily
yeah,
Monster. You know what I mean? It's that type of thing.
yeah. It's
It's
busy, isn't it? Very
yeah,
busy.
yeah. It is. It is. 2009, 2010. I mean, what a season for Tottenham Hotspur. Let's dive in there. I was just talking to Billy the other day about what was it, 2007, 2000 and whatever the Wando Ramos season was when
Yeah,
we won the
seven,
League
eight.
Cup. Martin Yole got sacked halfway
Yeah,
through the season, and we went on to win it. And we were sort of talking about then how there was almost a bit of a kind of little barren period after that where Spurs were horrible under Wande Ramos. Famously 2 points from 8 games, wasn't it? Um, Harry Redknapp came in, sort of steadied the ship that first season. And I think we were all left wondering what Spurs were going to be, how good or not we were going to be. There was a lot of still reservation over Harry Redknapp as to, all right, this is a bit of a laugh, but what are we actually going to do under this? And I seem to remember, what I can just about remember as well, there was enough anxiety there because we knew we had some good players. We knew there were some good players in this team, and there was almost a feeling of not wanting to waste them, shall we say, under Harry Redknapp's tutelage. But I think I seem to recall actually, I think this was the year. I think it was the year he started doing the fighting cock, and I seem to recall, and I'm not throwing him under the bus, but I seem to recall Flav saying at the start of that episode, Harry Redknapp couldn't manage a solid shit, let alone Tottenham Hotspur, and and that seemed to be a pretty popular consensus at that point. But how wrong we all were, because for me anyway, this was the start of one of the best periods I've ever had supporting this football club. And no more so than this season, because Man City as well was suddenly a thing now. There'd been a few years they'd been taken over by one guy who'd pumped loads of money in and it had failed, and then they got taken over again by like Mansour and everything like that now. And they were starting to become a threat. And this was the year that they were heavily tipped to break into the top four. That holy grail that Spurs had achingly come so close to. Obviously, Lasagna Gate and that sort of a thing under Martin Yole, but come so close to it. And it felt like that was drifting away from us once again. But we started the season with a win at Liverpool. At home to Liverpool, a team we classically never beat. And it felt like the die was cast, didn't it? It felt like something was a bit different at
Yeah, it
Spurs,
was
right?
weird. I really vividly remember I was in the car home after that game, and we were trying to get out of Tottenham, which is always a bit of a nightmare. But it did kind of give you an hour to listen to TalkSport or Five Live and listen to the kind of post-game reaction. And if I remember rightly, I think we were a 5:30 kickoff. We were the first 5:30 kickoff of the season. So the post match was entirely dedicated to Spurs Liverpool, and it was one win. And we'd had a decent end to the season. Previous season, we'd finished, I think, 8th under Redknapp, which, when you consider we were 2 points from 8 games, as you say, we turned it around quite quickly, and we were definitely on the up. But there was a phone in, and the question was, do you think Spurs can get top 4 this season after one win? And all right, Liverpool the season before had come second, but they just sold Torres, or were in the process of selling Torres. I can't remember exactly what basically they were on the way down. City, as you say, were just only really emerging as what exactly are you going to be? They had Mark Hughes. And I remember being quite surprised at that point and thinking, like, well, hold on, are we a contender for top 4 here? Like, it genuinely hadn't crossed my mind that we would be in the mix, really. I thought we'd have another sort of solid season, maybe get 6th, maybe 5th, something like that. But as we normally did, finish sort of 20 points behind 4th place or something. And yeah, we just kind of carried on from there. So we won the first 4 games of the season. I think we beat, if I remember rightly, we beat Liverpool, then Hull, then West Ham, and then Birmingham. And West Ham and Birmingham were 2 last-minute winners as well. So we were really on a high. And then I think we lost a couple in a row against United and Chelsea.
The United one was annoying because remember Defoe scored that bicycle.
And I remember
the
turning around and like screaming in this stranger's face that we were going to win the league, because it was like, how are we not going to do it? He's just scored an overhead kick within 13 seconds or whatever it was. It did a bit. It felt oddly a little bit similar to this season, maybe, but the bubble was definitely burst. But we reacted really well to anything like that. We still had this issue against the big sides going away from home. We lost to Arsenal, we lost to Chelsea, we lost to Liverpool. And it was only really City, and we lost to United as well, although it didn't really matter. But it was definitely it was a definite coming of age. And I think your point about Redknapp, we sort of met in the middle a little bit, because Redknapp had obviously had really a decent success at West Ham. I think they'd finished top 5 a few times. Then he's ended up going between like Southampton and Portsmouth, and he went and won the FA Cup, but Portsmouth were never really challenging up the top of the league or anything like that. And all of a sudden, it felt like the impression I got was Redknapp maybe thought that this was his last go at a big job. And as it turned out, is exactly what happened. But he did have this really talented group of players. He loved Defoe. He absolutely loved Defoe. He would have loved Lennon. He adored Modric. Bale came from nowhere and suddenly was this incredible left winger. King and Dawson that season as well. King had started his 1 game a week sort of schedule by that point. So a lot of things all came together at the same time to make this the start of a successful period. I feel like this was the last season where it was fun. And I'm not saying that under Poch that it wasn't brilliant, but almost every week under Poch, especially those title seasons, it was just stress. And pretty much under everyone since, up until probably the first few weeks of this season, it has been more like a relief to win a game than it has been that kind of unbridled joy. And that's because this season gave us that top 4, that first ever top 4 finish. Since then it's been really serious business for us to get back in the Champions League and be amongst those top teams in the league and in Europe. And it's meant so much to the club. But this was the first season that we actually managed it, and it was just playing this really kind of open brand of kind of 4-4-2 football. Big man, little man up front, 2 really pacey wingers, a tricky centre mid in Luka Modric, and then these 2 stalwarts of King and Dawson. It was so much fun, and it was the last time it felt like we went into a season just with very little pressure. And from that point onwards, from the point we qualified for the Champions League, and then the season after we got into the group stages, we signed Van der Vaart. All of those things just started to make us this club that was like, oh shit, we've got to kind of, we're in with the big boys now. We've got to behave like it a little bit. Whereas this one just felt like the chains were off a little bit and we just went for it. So it was a lot of fun. And I miss that feeling. I do miss that feeling of going into White Hart Lane and it not feeling like the world was on the line in one game of football. It just felt like we were a really free and expressive football team that season. And I hate the fact that it was 15 years ago as well. There's going to be, 20-year-old Spurs fans who have very little memory of this, if at all. Horrible.
It's mad, isn't it? Because this is, for me now, this is my memories.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
The heyday.
I remember the thoughts, the feelings, all of it. I just remember as towards sort of the end of the season, and I think it kind of started to feel like, look, we've had a good year, but City are really kind of breathing down our necks now. And we've now got Arsenal and then we've got Chelsea. So our form towards the end of the season, right? We had to play. And you can imagine looking at the fixtures. We've just lost 3-1 to Sunderland, right? And then we're like, well, right, our next fixtures are Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United away, Bolton, who always used to like showing up against us, and then Manchester City themselves. And I do remember just being like, we've had a good year, we've had fun, but this is where the sort of the journey ends now, doesn't it, really? Because if we can get draws out of Arsenal and Chelsea, then we've probably done all right. United will lose away too, and we did. And City, I can't see us beating City away when they want the top four as badly as they did. We just turned into superheroes in that final era. And like you say about Tottenham being fun, I think part of this was fun about this is that this was one of those seasons that almost it literally raised the bar. It set our expectations in a different place, because other than like a couple of years ago when we finished in the top four above Arsenal at Arsenal's expense, I would say collectively we've not been that asked about finishing in the top four or not. Like, as in, like, good, we're in the Champions League, we should be there, and if we don't get there, that's a bit annoying. We need that as a club now where we are. But this year, and people can take the piss if they want, but this was like winning a trophy. Spurs getting into the top four. That night at the Etihad was a cup final. Yeah. It was a cup final. It really, really was. And I guess this team maybe not having the same level of... I think, look, okay, number one, what we can't do is like... you can't completely gloss over the fact that really, at its core, this team was incredible. This team had some incredible players. I mean, for Christ's sake, it had Luka Modric and Gareth Bale in it, who have gone on to be two of widely considered the greatest footballers of all time. Like, do you know what I mean? So, like, when we kind of look to this, like, Spurs did so well because there was an expectation upon them. The fans enjoyed it more. It's like that. All these things are true, but when you go through this team, you look at players like Aaron Lennon, probably one of the greatest English wingers of his generation, was in absolutely phenomenal form at this point. Brilliant player. Peter Crouch had just come for decent money in the summer, who, he wasn't a world-class talent, but he was still a seasoned Premier League, Champions League striker, fit perfectly alongside Defoe, who just used to score for fun. He's one of the club's top scorers of all time. We had King and Woodgate at the back. We had a good team. We had a very good team. But equally, like you say, like there was less expectation there from us. I think there was less pressure on us from the media at this point. The pressure was on Manchester City. Manchester City were this new kind of petrostate-funded entity that had been ploughing money into the club for a few seasons now. They had some failed sort of, think about Robinho's and that type of a thing. And Roque Santa Cruz. Was it them? No, that was Blackburn.
Yeah, they
Or
signed
did City
Santa
sign Roque?
Cruz. Yeah, it was just one of those
Yeah,
ones
I
that they
thought
just
so.
threw some money at.
Yeah, exactly. So they had all these players, these flops, and the pressure was really on them. So there was less pressure on Spurs. There was less expectation. And the funny thing about this is, mate, is at this point, City were kind of the bad guys. And not only was this kind of like one of those periods, maybe part of what made this fun is that for once, actually, Spurs were kind of everybody's darlings a bit. Obviously not as Chelsea or Arsenal, but we were sort of that team where quite a few people were like, "Oh, I'd actually quite like Spurs to get into the top four. I actually, do you know what I mean? Like they've got quite a good team here, and they've got a good like batch of young players here, and I quite like them. I actually hope they do it. I hope they get. We don't want City to get in there.
We had a core of
Um,
the English team, didn't we? Because it was the World Cup that
yeah,
year, and if I remember rightly, Defoe went, Lennon went, Huddleston was on the bench, or like not the bench, but he was on the standby.
or maybe made the
Yeah, I think he
extended
made the
squad. I
standby
think on
list.
the phone.
Dawson made it because
Yeah.
Ferdinand got injured in the end. Ledley went. Crouch, I think, went but didn't play a minute. So, that's 6 pretty core members of that team that Redknapp had suddenly, sort of made explode and were in cracking form going into that. Obviously, it was a terrible World Cup for us, and um, I think you can lay that at the door of any Spurs player or anything. But it was. I think you're right. I think people did see us as this team that was sort of it challenged the elite as well. And do you know what's really sickening is, I don't know if you remember the season after, almost the exact same point in the league as when we beat City at the Etihad to get top four. We played them again. Crouch scored an own goal, and City got top four, and Spurs were fifth. And there just became this sort of meme of Spurs messing it up. Don't think it's the exact point of all of that starting. Don't think it was a Spursy thing at that point, because City had gone and spent like 300 million in the summer. I think they'd got Aguero and Torre and other players like that in the summer, despite coming fifth to us. And we started to get a little bit of flack for it, like a bit like, don't get too above your station, sort of back in your box, back in fifth, that sort of thing. And that was quite frustrating. And like I was saying, it felt like this was the last time that it could just be fun and just like we've gone and achieved something really great, rather than the expectation of fans, maybe the expectation of media, and just other clubs starting to see us as this, like a threat. That's where the rivalry with Man City started. And it remains to this day. We've got a really good record over Man City, and it sort of all started with that Crouch goal at the Etihad in that season. They don't seem to have ever really psychologically recovered from that. Don't get me wrong, they've done quite well, but in individual games against Spurs, they do seem to have just that element of not really knowing what to do with us. It's the only team probably in the whole of maybe world football that we have that over.
You remember those limbs in the
I still watch
away
it.
end,
I
mate?
still watch it
After
every so often. It's
it's
so good.
unbelievable, isn't it?
It's unright, and it's it helps. The camera angle helps because you can see us all over in that corner. But what I always really love is when you get that sort of footage, but if it's an away end, if half the end is the home fans, and there's a very definite kind of yellow line of stewards, and then you've got the away fans, and the Etihad is perfect for that because you always get great limbs shots on TV of Spurs there, and that's what makes it so good that we've had those nights there where have been so much fun, like the Champions League, going and winning 3-2 with that Kane performance, and this Crouch game. It's like the limbs is always brilliant, just purely because of where the camera's set up behind for us behind the goal.
It's it's all, even to this day, it's quite surreal that we did it, because like you say, like we've become, the past few years, Tottenham have become so synonymous really with just being the club that when we're faced with like a big challenge, when it's a big pressure moment, when it's like you have to show up here, I mean, to be fair, look, I'm skirting over the fact we did Ajax
But
just a
that
few
was
years
complete
ago.
backs to the
So
wall against Ajax. That was, you've got nothing to lose now, because it was second up. We were 3-0 down at half time. We had to, if you wanted to do it, you had to do it. That was it. It was do or die, right? Going to the Etihad against this City, I think, if I remember rightly, we were ahead of them, and a draw would have meant that we did have to go and beat Bolton and Burnley on the last game. I think that's how it was set up. So it was one of those, it could be enough, but you want that insurance as well. And we went for it. We really went for it. They had a couple of good
yeah,
chances. I think Gomez made a couple of good saves, but all I really remember, I think Bale had a good chance, may have hit the post. Defoe had a volley that, was it Martin Fulop? It was, wasn't it? Fulop, yeah, rest in
yeah,
peace.
well,
That he saved. And so we didn't soak up a load of pressure. We did that, what Redknapp wanted. We went all out for it. Because as well, what had happened is, you were talking about that run, Arsenal, Chelsea, United, City, Bolton, etc. That had obviously come straight after the FA Cup semi-final that we lost to Portsmouth, which was probably, I reckon it's probably the lowest I've ever left a stadium, was that day after that
yeah,
game. Awful. But what had happened was, Chorluka had got injured in that game, and I think Palacios got injured taking down Boateng for their penalty. So we went into the Arsenal and Chelsea games with Yunus Kabul at right back, because we had nobody else that could play there. And that is when Modric moved into the middle and Bale came in at left wing. Modric moved in the middle instead of Palacios and partnered Huddleston and Lennon on the right. And we suddenly became this really balanced team. And I remember a lot of talk before the City game about what are we going to do? Are we going to bring, are we going to move Modric back out to the left, maybe go a little bit more defensive, put two centre mids in the middle? I think Bentley was playing at that point as well, because maybe Leonard had been injured as well. So, but he didn't. He went all out for it, and we went 4-4-2, really attacking, gave Modric some freedom, and the two guys up front. So, and I think it's the last time I can really remember us from the start of the game going for it. It wasn't like Ajax. We didn't have that backs to the wall element of, this is now or never. It was just, this is a single one-shot game, basically a cup final. This is how I want you to play. I don't want you to go out there and win it. And it took a while, I think about 83 minutes or something, Crouch's goal. But we definitely got what we deserved that day. We didn't just sit there. It wasn't a sucker punch in any way, that game. They definitely bottled it, Man City, without question, in front of their home fans.
I don't even know if they. I think that does us a disservice to say they bottled it, mate. I think we were just
That's
better
fair.
than them. Do you know what I mean? And that's the nice thing about this is what I sort of really do remember about this, because the season after, like you say, it did come down to Spurs and City again, didn't it? And they got the better of us that time because they'd added a lot more talent and stuff to the ranks. But it felt like at this point, City were getting there, and we knew they were. Everyone knew they were going to become what they are today. We all knew it was a matter of time. But at this point, for Spurs to have built the team that we had at this point, because like I said at the top, we knew there was quality in this squad. We knew it was like it was oozing class, if you like. There was that bit of me that thought, wait your turn, City. Like, you're going to have all this. We aren't going to have this squad. You know this squad's going to get picked to pieces soon enough. You know Bale's going to be gone. You know Modric is going to be gone. Whoever else, King's going to retire soon. Just let us have our day in the sun with this team, please. Like, we've waited for so long for a decent team to come along. We've had so many near misses. And I just remember like this absolute feeling of a sense of like I was elated, but there was a sense of almost like vindication about it as well, in that I kind of felt like we deserve this. We actually deserve this top five. I don't feel like we've gotten this like hook or by crook, wing and a prayer. Like, we deserve this. Like, you wait your turn. Like, we've waited long enough. We've had enough kind of crap from Arsenal, from Chelsea. Like, two of the best teams in the league absolutely despise us and win the league all the time and let us know about it. Like, just let us. All right, fair enough. Manchester United are your rivals as well. So, to this straw man Manchester City. So they do feel some of that pain as well. I do get that. But just in this instance, your future success is so much more guaranteed than ours is, and probably ever will be. And just to see Spurs actually, like you say, just stand up and just be counted, it is just one of those it's such a proud memory, and it's so good that they did it. Like you say, they did it. It was the evening kickoff. All the eyes were on this game. Everyone was kind of, I hope, a lot of Arsenal Chelsea fans, my mates were like, I hope you don't get the Champions League. You lot will be unbearable and all that type of thing. And just winning this game, it was like a cup final. It was unbelievable. Crouch was a hero, and Redknapp was a hero. We should probably talk about do we say infamous? I guess infamous.
Yeah,
The ice
drenching.
bucket after the game, because I loved that when that happened. But he apparently, like, history dictates that he was utterly fuming about that, and I guess you can probably, to be fair to him, one of the finest kind of nights of his career as a manager, one of his greatest achievements, and he's being reduced to, again, a source of kind of banter by David Bentley.
It was definitely the fact that it was Bentley. If
Yeah, you kind of know, like, there's a bit of me that thinks, go on, get your head out your ass, but you can kind of see where he's coming
there's
from.
My favourite memory of that isn't when he pours it over him. It's when he sort of laughs at it, and then Bentley comes back into shot and puts his arm round him and does a sort of cheeky grin right down. Yeah, that's it, like right down the camera. Yeah, right down the camera. And it's that point that you think he's probably, that's the bit where he's like, fuck off, mate. Just fuck off. Because he wasn't a fan of Bentley. I think he, for all that happened to Bentley, I think Redknapp saw it straight away. He was a bit of a big time Charlie. Wasn't really going to be there for long term. So this probably did him a favour in the long term. Just like, yeah, see you later. Like, thanks very much, but you've got no place left here at all. But yeah, it's so funny that it was, of all people, it had to be him. Did they do Levy as well? I don't know if I'm making this up.
No, I think that's the Mandela effect of Daniel Levy doing the whatever it was, the
ice bucket
charity,
challenge.
the ice bucket challenge.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, AVB nominated Levy for that.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Redknapp's probably not brought a change of suit with him, has he? It's not like the players where they're going to have something to go home in that's probably quite comfortable. I imagine he's not gone home. He's gone home in the spare PE kit, the lost property at Man City, a couple of old pants. For the whole coach ride home from Man City.
I'm just trying to see that if there's any Redknapp quotes about it. Somebody said, all right, so here it is. So I think Bentley spoke about it. He said, the lads tried to get the chairman in the changing room, and somebody said, get the gaffer. Turned out he was being interviewed at the time, so we went and did it. It was just a celebration. I wasn't trying to make him look silly, but he wasn't happy because he was trying to change his image, and I went and chucked water all over him. He wanted to be like Sir Alex Ferguson. I played loads that year. There was no problem between us, but that was the end for me. I mean, There you go. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's
very bold to put
the
entirety of the end of his Spurs career on that moment. Like, he hadn't been great. He said he played a lot, which he did because Lennon got injured. I think he played quite a lot at left wing as well. But he was never going to be lasting long term there. So I think that's a bit of rewriting history from Bentley there.
It just feels like with Bentley, he was, and it's funny saying that because we're talking 15 years ago, but Bentley was a player that, like we often say of like Lucas Moura, because I think Lucas Moura would have cleaned up in this era, in this sort of 2009, 2010. Similarly, David Bentley would have been a fantastic footballer back in the 4-4-2 era that was probably a decade before his time, you know, the kind of late 90s, early noughties. He was often called like the
Yeah,
next David Beckham and everything. And it's you know, David Beckham was a fantastic player, but where would you fit him, for example, that skill set he had now,
yeah,
for example, in football today? And I think football was where it is sort of now, it was already moving towards this at that point. And players like Bentley did just sort of get left behind. I think there were probably issues, you know, he's sort of spoken about his mental health and things. And I think he's owned up to himself that he probably didn't take football as seriously as he could have done. I think his England career was curtailed because he decided it was more beneficial to shout postman Pat at Fabio Capello than actually listen to what he was telling him to do on a football pitch. And that just sort of sums him up a bit, isn't it?
Bentley's
He's a
side there, to
player
be
that,
fair.
yeah, but he was put in sort of positions to do
Yeah,
really
yeah.
well. To, you know, he started his career at Arsenal, didn't really take off, and then he went to Norwich, looked unbelievable. I was
Mm.
buzzing when we signed him. I thought he was going to be absolutely brilliant for us, and we saw in glimpses that he was. That goal at the Emirates, can't take that away from him. Like, unbelievable. But it never really landed for him. And you know what? If this was his sort of final action in a Spurs shirt, at least it's one for us. It's one for the ages for us, because I look at this moment very fondly. I thought it was brilliant when it happened to Redknapp. I thought it was
Yeah,
hilarious, you know.
yeah,
So it's you know, is what it is, isn't it?
yeah. I can't. He's one of those players that I can't think. With most Spurs players, regardless of how they end up, you can usually pick out a few moments, particularly if they've been bought for big money, say. But outside of that game at the Emirates, I really can't think of anything that Bentley did for us. The only thing I think is, do you remember the game against Liverpool that we won 2-1 the season before this one? Pav scored at the near post. That came from a shot from Bentley. He sort of chests it down and he cut across it and it swerved. It was like amazing. It was a really, if it had gone in, it would have been, you know, one of probably our greatest ever Premier League goals. It was such a good hit. Rayner saved it and then it went out to Lennon and he put it in for Pavlyuchenko to score. That's all I've got. I really cannot think of anything else that Bentley did for us.
He played really well in that pre-season
Yeah,
friendly against
everyone did
Roma
though, man.
as
Like if
well.
I'd have
And
come on, I think
yeah,
I'd have done all right in that.
beat him like
Yeah,
14-0, didn't we? And we were like, we're going to
yeah.
win the league.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, we're
yeah,
shite.
yeah. Roma probably got relegated that year or something, didn't they? Do you know what I mean? I mean, any anything else to add on the football at this time, mate? Anything else in closing?
I just, yeah, like I say, it just felt like the last time that it didn't feel like everything. You know, every game didn't feel like it had the world riding on it. And it's fair to say that Crouch doesn't score that goal, we maybe don't have any of the memories that we've had in the last sort of 14, 15 years. We probably don't get those Inter games that Bale, you know, destroyed them in. We maybe don't sign Van der Vaart. We maybe the whole AVB Sherwood thing doesn't happen because, you know, that felt like such a climb down or such a come down after these years that, you know, when Poch came in, he had a chance to sort of clean house and start again. We maybe don't have all of that happen. I think we probably would have got there eventually. I think we were always planning on becoming the sort of club that we are now in the stadium and whatever else. But yeah, this felt like the very last season where we were maybe little Tottenham, if you like, and we started to become what we are now. This season predates like Stratford and all of that crap that was going around at that time. England coming in for Redknapp, you know, Bale's unbelievable season in 12-13, Kane, Ali, you know, Son, Ericsson, all of that potentially doesn't happen if this season doesn't happen. So it's just, it's very, I'm really happy to come on this and talk about this season because, like I say, it was my first season ticket season. It just felt like every game was so enjoyable to go and watch. And I think we had a couple of really disappointing games. I think we lost to Wolves at home that season. We drew with Hull when, do you remember Boat's Myhill saved everything? Absolutely everything that went at him. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And then saved nothing
Yeah,
else
and
ever again.
one came off his hair, and for his entire career he was bald and shaved head, except for that one game. And there was one shot in particular, I think it was from Robbie Keane, and it went off his hair and onto the bar, and it meant that we ended up with a 0-0. We drew with Villa, I think, at home as well that season. So, but
Yeah.
that happens now in the pursuit of top four, which is now the benchmark for Spurs, rightly or wrongly, whether we like it or not. That does feel like it is.
It's our par,
it's what we aim for as a look. Get this. If you go out in the other cups, in the first rounds, but you get top four, you can probably just about say you've had a good season still. So it's so nice to kind of relive it and think that this was the start of that sort of mini journey, if you like. And just some of the players that we had. I was a massive Chorluka fan. I loved Charlie Chorluka. He was so dependable and nothing spectacular, no pace whatsoever, just a decent right back. Huddleston, I was a massive Huddleston fan. Again, no pace, couldn't get round, but how clean he hit a ball. He scored a goal that season against Sunderland in the game that Darren Bent missed a penalty at Park Lane end. That was a great moment. And then go up the other end and Huddleston scores a screamer off the bar. There's just so many great memories of this. And like I say, it just felt like it was the fun era of Spurs, just before we grew up and got a real job. This was sixth form Spurs.
The thing I kind of feel that when I was thinking about recording this pod and I was thinking about what this sort of represents to me is obviously like great fun and amazing memories and everything, but because what you've touched on there is so true, I feel, in terms of the Spurs that we've become, everything that we are after this point. We have kicked on another level, right? And it does kind of remind me that before this point, before we got into the Champions League, this was the impossible dream for us, right? It was always, we're never going to get in the Champions League. And there was still that part in the back of my head that we can do whatever we want to do. We can try and do this. We can try. Our place in this conversation is every now and again getting in the UEFA Cup, Europa League, and maybe winning the FA Cup. Champions League is because, again, it's easy to forget quite how good Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool were. Like, they were so much better than everybody else. So much better than everybody else. It wasn't even close. And yes, maybe that dominance was starting to wane somewhat as we were getting towards this era, the sort of the 2010s. And Exhibit A, Tottenham Hotspur getting into the Champions League. Manchester City coming along as well, though, sort of to me felt like we've had Chelsea do it and now City are doing it. And unless we sell up, we're never going to get anywhere. And then to actually do it, to be sat here now looking at these pictures, looking at pictures of Spurs players with bottles of champagne, having won at the Etihad, having before this beaten Arsenal, beaten Chelsea, having had done it, it shows you and it reminds me that anybody can do it. We can do it, and we have done it, and we've been so browbeaten by Twitter, by other fan bases, by Dulux Dogs, by Paddy Power, by Sky, by Gary Neville, by all of it that say all the time, Spurs don't do this, Spurs don't do that, Spurs don't win stuff, Spurs don't turn up. But we do, and we've seen it with our own eyes. And yeah, we've fallen short a little bit the past few years. But at the same time, we got to a Champions League final. We came second. We went a whole season unbeaten, and that stuff just gets forgotten because maybe we're not taking a leap. We're not tangibly doing something. Like, this was a transition from Tottenham being nothing to suddenly being one of the elite, to being a top four team. My roundabout point is that we don't know what this season that we're going into holds, because much like this year, we can look at this Tottenham team that we did here and be like, well, we're good. We've got some good players. That Modric lad's decent. don't really know where we can play him. That Gareth Bale is going to be a star, isn't he? I think he is going to be a star. It'll be nice to see Crouch and Defoe up top. They're not, they're not Drogba. They're not, it's not Thierry Henry, but they're both all right. And you can probably look at Spurs now and think, we've got some really good players. Like, we've got James Maddison, we've got Sonny. Everything's not great. It's not perfect, but we're still really good. Ange is sort of an unknown quantity. But for all we know, mate, this is the year that we carry on the season like we started this season, and we do go on and just win the league. You don't that it might happen. It might happen in as impossible as that seems to us right now. This sort of season, what can happen in this sort of year? Spurs finishing top 4, and we the closest we ever came was the lasagna year, but we did it, and you never know. Like, the next milestone for us, really, like, people say you're entitled to this, you're that, but really, the uncharted territory for Spurs now is to win the Premier League. That is the step that we take, because we've finished top 4 consistently from this point. After this 2009-10 season, we've been in I would probably after this point been in the Champions League more times than Manchester United have, or more times than even maybe Arsenal have. And we don't get any credit for that. We get derided for that. And so it seems to be that the next frontier for Spurs is to win the Premier League. And, I think you just have to hold on to hope that once upon a time people looked at these lads here and said, not a chance, it's Tottenham after all.
There's only 6 years. There's only 6 years between, think of Lasagna Gate and this picture. That's 4 or 5 years in between. Then there's, between this picture and the season we went unbeaten at White Hart Lane is 6 years, 6, 7 years. So we go in these cycles. We've always done it. Always under ENIC especially. First port of call was getting to Europe. That's what they wanted to do. And we did that. 2004, 2005 sort of time. Got ourselves into Europe. Next thing was Champions League. Took us 4 or 5 years again, managed it. Maybe the next thing was win a title. I think it always was getting top 4, and hence it's maybe why we've sort of stagnated a little bit, or just been a bit, let's say, happy, and the culture of the club is to just be happy with top 4. But we did it, and we got ourselves a title challenge in that middle sort of 2015 to 2017. We were one of the best teams in the country. We were the best team in the country. That's why it's so painful. And I think it's why the most recent years have felt so frustrating, because, all right, we know now it's not easy to win the league. It's obviously it's not easy to win the league, and it's never been more difficult with Man City's dominance and all the rest of that. But it's felt as if we are overdue that next round. We are overdue. It's been 6 years. This season will be 7 years since that title push in 16-17 under Poch, and seen as the kind of perfect season for us, or almost perfect season for us. And since then, we've really dicked about. And I know there's context with the stadium, but the managers we've gone through, the players we've gone through, the different sort of approaches that we've had, it's felt frustrating, because we have had this sort of cyclical approach, or cyclical sort of, this cycle has happened to us many times, and it's just felt as if we didn't quite win the title. We feel like we're only a few seasons away from having a team that's capable of doing it. And we may do it next season. We may have another perfect storm. Who knows? But it's definitely why the last few years have felt so frustrating, because we have always broken the glass ceiling under ENIC. People don't like to hear that. I think it is a truth, though. I think if you really scaled everything back and you saw where we were when they took over, totally get the lack of trophies, and I think they are culpable for it. I think the culture they set is definitely a big contributing factor to why we haven't won anything in what is now 16 years. But you can't deny that we have always strived for better, and up until probably the sort of late 20 teens, if you like, we managed it, and we were so close to winning it all. In 2 years, we could have won a Premier League and we could have won a Champions League. Whether we deserved it or not, who cares? We could have done it. We were probably 1 or 2 games away in both of those seasons from doing it. So, it feels like it's going to have to happen soon, because it does feel like time is running out a little bit. But we've done it before. So, this is a good example of a season where no one fancied us. But you can ride a wave all the way to the end, can't you? I mean, fucking hell, we've got Pavlyuchenko holding champagne in the middle there, like Pav scoring, crucial goals in it. These are the players that sometimes make up the squad. Maybe we need a few more Pavs and Kranchars and like Alan Huttons. I don't know. Like you need that sort of a broad church, don't you, to achieve what you want to.
I like to set the mood towards the end of this mate, just to see the show out. A bit of fun, at the end. Like everyone likes a bit of that, don't they? I wanted to see if you could sort of name some of the best-selling singles in the UK in the year 2010, and I would say, looking at some of these, mate, this was not a vintage year for Foins when it comes to music. I would say this is officially probably the era when bands died. Do you know what I mean?
Like, trying to think of what I was listening to. I mean, some may argue I still am, but I was a very sort of pretentious early 20s, sort of out of uni and just sort of, reading Jack Kerouac on the train. And just I was quite into, or felt as if I was quite into sort of quite a lot of, I don't know, underground indie stuff. Give me sort of the mid 2000s, 2004 to 2006, I probably would smash this. But honestly, I genuinely can't think of much. Around then, I would think, I don't know, Kesha a thing?
Let's see if it was.
Del Rey, she would have been around then as well.
No, Kesha wasn't in the top 50 best-selling singles.
Absolutely robbed.
So, I'll tell you the best-selling single of 2010 was "Love the Way You Lie" by Eminem feat. Rihanna. Number 2, I honestly I couldn't even tell you what this song is. "When We Collide" by Matt Cardle.
Isn't that the cover of Biffy Clyro? He was a winner of X Factor or Pop Idol, one of those, and he did a cover of Biffy Clyro.
I am a mountain. I am a tea. You can't take it away from me. Yeah. I love
as well. That was a great era.
Really good live. I had a one of those really funny moments. I remember seeing Biffy Clyro. I remember going to Reading like years ago when I was like a kid, like 17, 18, and seeing. I'm pretty sure I saw Biffy Clyro then on like one of the Radio 1 tent type stages, and then I randomly went to Reading just for the day. A couple of years ago because I wanted to watch Queens of the Stone Age. Queens of the Stone Age was supposed to be headlining Reading, and they pulled out because of COVID stuff, and Biffy Clyro took their place. And I remember I just had this weird like symmetry moment of like remembering watching Biffy Clyro when I was about sort of 17, 18 in a scuzzy little tent at Reading, and then suddenly seeing them on the main stage in my 30s being like, God, this is quite mad. It was one of those moments. It's like, I'm really enjoying this, but this is so strangely depressing in a way I can't quite quantify. You know what I mean? Like, it tweaks like a weird kind of nerve inside of you. That's whatever it is. A few other tunes from this time. "Only Girl in the World" by Rihanna.
Definitely a tune, Rihanna season.
I could tap my foot to that one. "Omg" by Usher featuring will.i.am. That was up there, mate. "Fireflies" by Owl City. Always makes me think of Richard Arrowsmith, that one, a mutual friend of ours. If he won't be listening, but if you are listening,
why?
Because he really likes Owl City.
But nothing more than not a memory of him or anything.
No more context than that. No, just,
I reckon I would do better on films of this era, and I'm not a film. You are the man for film.
I'm not the man.
You are a man for film. All of this, I reckon I could. I'm no more good. I can think of how the tune goes. Would never have guessed in a million years that it was 2010. just have a massive blank out.
California
Yeah,
Girls, Katy Perry.
bit
It's
of a
quite,
banger.
they're
I
undeniable.
need to listen to that now. Now that I've got the fuck over myself, and put myself on a bangers playlist on Spotify when I'm painting a bedroom or something. Like, much more likely to be belting that sort of thing out now than I was at 23.
Imagining you brush.
Yeah,
You're hot, then you're cold. You're in, then you're out. You know what I mean?
Now that was a banger. That is a banger, to be fair.
Yeah, it was. There's actually, do you know what she did? It. She released when the record label were trying to find out what Katy Perry was, what market they could sell her to. They released that song initially as like a kind of punk rock tune,
bit Avril,
hot and cold. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly that. And you can find it.
Really,
it's actually a banger. I'm not gonna lie.
I had no
actually
idea.
A banger.
There you go.
Yeah, you have to listen to it as soon as we finish.
I'll go
this,
and research.
You have to listen to that and do some wall painting. But we can do. We could. Oh God, let's have a look at some of the films. Right, we'll see the Oscars.
If I remember rightly, 2010, Inception.
Let's have a look. Where are they? Where's the bloody? Just give me the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like websites when they just irritate. Right. Okay. View by category. Actor in a leading role.
Well, DiCaprio famously didn't win one for ages, did he? So he wouldn't have got one. I'm sure Inception was 2010.
I wouldn't have gotten this one. I don't think you'll get it. It's Jeff Bridges for Crazy Heart. He won that. Actor in a supporting role was Christoph Waltz for Inglourious Bastards. What?
Put that at 2010 either.
Actress in a leading role, Sandra Bullock for The Blind Side, which I think that story's been completely cancelled now as well, hasn't it? There's something really grim about the way in which the family used the kid, and it's horrendous. Actress in a supporting role was Monique on Precious. Did you ever see Precious?
Yeah, incredible.
Bleak, brilliant, but bleak film, man. Bleak. Animated feature, Up, art direction, Avatar. God, Avatar's 2010. That's mad. Cinematography, Avatar. It was all bloody green screened. Costume design, The Young Victoria, Sandy Powell. Now directing. Oh, this is a good one. Good one. You guess who won the best director?
2010. So is this for the two films released in 2009?
Yeah, well, there's the window, isn't there? I can't remember what it goes up to, like the first few months, 2010 as well. It's almost like a season, isn't it? Like a football season.
Well, there was a lot of Transformers films. Did Bay get close to that best director that he truly deserved? I've got no fucking idea, mate. Cameron.
It was Catherine Bigelow.
Oh, right, okay. I wouldn't have put that at 2009 either.
Documentary winner.
I was clearly pickling myself between 18 and 25. It's just that era that, so I think I just gave myself to football, home and away. That was the one you could spend the entire day and evening, and the football was an unfortunate distraction.
Music was Up, Michael Giacchino. Great score, that. Best picture was The Hurt Locker.
Right,
okay. It was The Hurt Locker. The nominees that year were Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9.
Oh, Blonde Mate. I watched that the other day, and I don't really know why.
Yeah. An Education, Inglourious Bastards, Precious, A Serious Man, Up, and Up in the Air. So
good era though.
Yeah, interesting one. Good era of cinema. Some good films there. I would say I watched The Hurt Locker at the time. I've not watched it since. I don't know. War stuff never really, contemporary war stuff. It doesn't really float my boat. So there you go. But thank you very much for joining me today.
Enjoyed that. Enjoyed that. A time when I had more hair and less money, less responsibility, and less. A pint didn't cost 10 quid. Back in our day.
Hey mate, back in our day. You could leave your front door open. Sure, sure, the contents of your house would get
But
robbed.
you could.
You could leave it open. You literally could leave it open.
Yeah, a pint was threepence.
Yeah, threepence and a turnip.
No, good stuff. Enjoyed
yeah.
that, mate. Really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Come on, you Spurs. Thank you very much, Tom Foins. See you next year, probably.
Cheers, mate.